Austin and Los Angeles are similar in some ways, different in many ways. I happen to have lived in both cities within my life. If you're someone who's considering moving to either one, maybe this video will help you. We're going to be comparing and contrasting the two cities and seeing how they measure up in a variety of ways. So if that's what you clicked here to find out, stay tuned. Hello again, everybody. If this is your first time to the channel, my name is Frank. I'm part of a team at the award-winning J.B. Goodwin Brokerage right here in the lovely Austin, Texas. Every week, we put out tons of new content all in regards to living in Austin, Texas, whether it's the pros and cons, the cost of living, comparisons of certain cities and states like this video, vlog tours of various neighborhoods and suburbs, top 10s and other rankings, you name it, we do it, and it's what we love to do. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this channel and ring the little bell so that you're notified each and every time we put out a new video. Ever since we've started this YouTube channel, we have had an absolute blast, and we've been loving all the reach outs we've been getting from people moving and relocating here from all over the place. So if that applies to you, be sure to reach out to us, whether you call us, whether you email us, whether you text us, any day of the week, any time of day. We enjoy making it as easy as possible, so all you've got to do is go over here and we'll take care of the rest. So without further ado, let's compare Austin and Los Angeles and hopefully help you arrive at your own conclusion. Now, one of the first things I'll mention when comparing the two cities is the different types of people that you'll encounter. Now, granted, I only spent a little over a year in Los Angeles, so I'm not going to claim to be from there, all my life. I do admit that my assessment is more of a sample size than it really is an entire lifetime, but when you live somewhere for a year is a year. That's a lot of time, and I like to think I at least got a decent idea. And obviously, I'm going to be generalizing a healthy amount because everyone's different. I'm not saying that every single person you meet in Los Angeles is going to be a certain way, but what I will say is that a lot of people, dare I say a majority of the people I encountered there, were very cold, were very serious, a lot of them rude, not too friendly, not too warm, and very much me, myself, and I. That's the impression I got. In a city like Los Angeles, a bulk of the people who live there are going to be what are called transplants, meaning they're not from there. Similar to Austin in a lot of ways, but not quite on par. Los Angeles is Los Angeles. It's Hollywood, it's one of the main attractions of the country, of the world. And a majority of the people who find themselves moving to Los Angeles do so for the auditions, they do it for the music scene, they do it to be in film, they do it for production, they do it for directing, they do it for improvisational comedy, and really anything that the industry or the arts has to offer. And a lot of those people, unfortunately, again, not all, but a good amount of them, are very ego-driven, and that's not necessarily a bad way to be. I'm not shaming that, because I think being driven, being self-disciplined, being focused are great traits for anyone to have in their lives when they're aspiring to become something. Part of my time in Los Angeles to make a living and pay my rent was working in the service industry, and anyone who's worked in the service industry can relate to what I'm about to say. You meet all types of people. You encounter all of them. Some having great days, some having bad days. All the different stereotypes that could possibly exist, you encounter them. And so it gave me a good idea of just the general vibe of the people. And from someone who grew up in Austin, Texas, I was a little bit thrown. I got looked at funny for saying my pleasure. I got looked at funny for saying yes ma'am, no ma'am. I even recall one of my managers pulling me aside and saying, hey, you don't have to say my pleasure. And I said, I know, but I'm from Texas. We like to have manners and we like to be polite and warm and friendly. That's the Texan way. but it was a little bit foreign in the world of Los Angeles, so I just wanted to make that clear. Now, on the subject of Austin, it's very different. Now, of course, anywhere you go, you're gonna have your jerks, you're gonna have your not so nice people, so Los Angeles is not alone in that sense. But in Austin, you find that people are more down to earth, they are warmer. Strangers will strike up conversation with you, invite you to their cookout, ask you how your day's going. And I just think that type of friendliness is very ingrained within the culture here in Texas, especially Austin, which prides itself in being weird, fun, friendly, eclectic, artistic, unique, hipster, but at the end of the day, Texan. So I've talked about how Austin is more warm and friendly, and I've talked about how Los Angeles is more me, myself, and I. And on that note, let's talk about the drivers and a little bit of the traffic. Now, the drivers in Los Angeles, I have never been more astounded in my life at the lack of safety you feel when you're on a frickin' road in Los Angeles. I genuinely, and I am not exaggerating, I genuinely asked myself and others if they just pass anyone and give them their license. And the short answer I got is basically yeah. The city is so densely populated and the DMVs all over the place are such a mess, always with lines out the door, that the people who work there basically just like next, yep, yes, you, yeah. And voila, anyone can drive. And it shows. Not only is the traffic appalling, which of course it's Los Angeles, it's notorious for having horrific traffic, which, no, I was gonna say I got used to it, but no, I don't think I ever really did. I think I got used to not being used to it, if that made sense, but it never wasn't an issue, you know what I mean? And so naturally, nobody would let you in. People would be pulling all types of illegal stuff left and right, pun intended, and just driving you crazy. But to their credit, I will say, it's some of the most dangerously amazing driving I've also ever seen, because when you're going down the 405 or the 210, and these people are going 75, 85, 95, just speeding around you if the traffic is moving, it's remarkably impressive because someone can be tailgating at 90 an hour and then they'll just swerve out and do all these maneuvers and these catapult type NASCAR, if I watch NASCAR, so I don't really know if that's a correct example, but really, like, all the time I was expecting to see a crash happen, like, oh my gosh, that was bold, oh my gosh, that was brave. But no, it was like this, if you've ever seen B-Movie, where Barry's friend said, hey, do you think things are a little bit too perfect around here? And it shows the scene of them at traffic, and all of these cars are doing all of these things that blow your mind, and it's seamless and effortless. That's what driving in Los Angeles is like, at least on those freeways. So yeah, I was ready to die basically anytime I got on the freeway. But what's really interesting is I rarely saw wrecks. I rarely saw people getting pulled over. I even asked the friends that I would eventually make in Los Angeles, hey, do people even get pulled over here? And they were just kind of like, now the police have other things to do, you know? And in Texas, you get pulled over all the time. So in summary, the driving in Los Angeles is reckless, it's scary, it's dangerous, it's a little irresponsible, and all of that is under the assumption if you're on the freeway before 2 or 3 p.m. because once you get on after that, bumper to bumper, and it stays that way until probably 9 or 10 at night in my experience. Now, before we move on, be sure to comment down below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do I have no idea what I'm talking about? Do you have any questions for us? Or even better, do you have any ideas for future videos we can make for you? Drop them all down below. We'd love to get involved with you guys. And in addition, tap the like button on this video as it really helps our channel grow and tells us that we're doing a great job providing value for you guys. Now, on the subject of Austin, and I don't want my bias to be too controlling, because I think eventually in this video I'm gonna mellow out and give Los Angeles its praise. But on the subject of driving, it's much better in Texas. Now, Austin, I've said in my other videos, I'll stand by it, Austin is getting worse with its traffic. It is the #1 place in the country for relocation as it stands right now. And so naturally, with all the people coming here, each year the traffic is getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And especially it's because Austin, unlike its neighbors in Texas like Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Austin was just a small college town to start out with. And the population in Austin grew more rapidly than the city's infrastructure did. And so for the past decade or so, Austin has been in this endless cycle of just construction. And when there's traffic, they do construction to improve traffic. And when they do construction to improve traffic, traffic gets worse. And then people are moving here, so that makes it worse. So I'm not saying that Austin is devoid of that, but when you put it side by side with Los Angeles, it's a breeze, and people in Austin let you in. That's another thing I rarely saw in Los Angeles. People waving, people signaling, people stopping, people just being friendly and courteous and very Texan on the road. I feel better now having gotten that off my chest and having said my piece. So now that we've addressed the drivers, the traffic, the people, etc., let's move on to another subject, which I usually say for the end of our comparison videos, but I thought why not get it done a little bit earlier in this video, and that would be the subject, cost of living. Now I promise eventually in this video I will start praising Los Angeles, because so far it's pretty much just been me praising Austin, and I do acknowledge that, and we'll get there, but first a little bit more stuff that you have to know that is unfortunately against Los Angeles, and that would be the numbers. So I brought my trusty notepad. For this cost of living, I'm not gonna bore you, but I am gonna go through some numbers relatively quickly. And the way I'm gonna do it is, if you just picture in your mind's eye the national average being 100, I'm just gonna go through some numbers, LA, Austin, and see how they compare to the national average being either above 100 or below 100, and more importantly, how they compare with each other. So strap in, we're gonna do this. For starters, one of the things that caught my eye is the subject of salary. Now, if you are making $100,000 in Austin, most sources will say you want to be making around $150,000 if you're going to be living in Los Angeles for the same equivalent quality of life. Food for thought. So let's start with transportation. Now, national average being 100, Los Angeles is 165, which is 65% more expensive for transportation than the national average. I would imagine a large part of that being those gas prices. Austin, Texas transportation, just 110 out of 100, so that would be 10% higher than the national average, and 33.5% cheaper in Austin than Los Angeles for transportation. Next up, let's talk about the health. Now, in Los Angeles, that is going to be an 89, so that's 11% cheaper than the national average. Austin, 94, 6% cheaper than the national average, which makes Austin about 5.5% more expensive in the world of health than Los Angeles. A nice surprise. Next up is going to be food and groceries. Los Angeles, 104, so 4% higher than the national average for food and groceries. Austin, 96.7, so that's about 3% cheaper than the national average, being about 7% less, 7% cheaper than Los Angeles for food and groceries. Now, in my own experience living in Los Angeles, I do recall it being a little more pricey buying groceries than I was accustomed to, but I will say in defense of Los Angeles, it really wasn't that much worse, right? Like your milk is gonna be more or less the same. It just might have been different things like a bag of Doritos or some cereal where you might think, oh, that's more than I thought it would be. Stuff like that, but I won't say it was necessarily drastic in my own experience. Next on the list is the subject of utilities. In Los Angeles, it's actually going to be about 94%, which is 6% cheaper than the national average for utilities. That is great news if you're an Angelino. Austin, however, right about 99. So basically, Austin is on par with the national average for utilities. But let me explain why it's going to be more expensive than California. And that is because in the months of, I'd say May, June, July, and August, a lot of years it could be April, May, June, July, August, September, it gets to the triple digits here. And I'm not saying it never hits that in Los Angeles because in the year that I spent there, we saw some triple digits. And unless you're on the coast, it's gonna suck. But in Austin, or I guess Texas in general, the air is much less dry than California. It feels more muggy, it feels more dense, it feels more humid. And so with that in mind, I would pick an 85-degree day in LA than an 85-degree day in Austin, because if you open your weather app and you scroll down and it says feels like, 85 could feel like 100 in Texas, whereas 85 in LA is gonna feel like 85. And the reason why the utilities in Austin are more expensive than Los Angeles is because in Los Angeles, it rocked my world. Most places that I saw didn't even have ACs. They were just built without them. And I eventually learned that, yeah, that's much of the case for a lot of the world. Well, in the South, it's notoriously hot, so most, if not all homes you're gonna find here are built with ACs, and you're gonna keep them cranked and running for consecutive months until it's more bearable to open your windows or go outside. So here is where it gets juicy. The median price of a home. Now, if you're watching this video in the first place and you're considering living in either city, this is going to apply to you, so keep those ears perked. The average cost of a home in the city of Los Angeles is $689,500. Call it just under 700 grand. In Austin, you're looking at around 370, about 380 grand anywhere in that window. And it sounds significantly cheaper than Los Angeles, which is mind-blowing, and I'll tell you why. Living in Texas, Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio, the other main cities apart from Austin, are significantly cheaper to live in than Austin. I say it in all of our videos, Austin is the most expensive city in all of Texas to live in, significantly. And so to put that in perspective, the difference in median home price between Austin and Los Angeles is a whopping $320,000, approximately 46.5% cheaper to live in than Los Angeles, even though it is by far the most expensive city to live in Texas. So still on the subject of the price of housing, let's go back to those percentage points. Los Angeles, 298, with the national average being 100. Austin, 160, with the national average being 100. And again, 46.5% less expensive to live in Austin, Texas. Now, last but not least, on the subject of the cost of living between both cities, we're gonna look at everything combined, so utilities, health, food and groceries, housing, everything I just mentioned averaged out. LA is going to be 173, so 73% higher than the national average. Austin is going to be 119, so just 19% more expensive than the national average. And at the end of the day, Austin is going to be 31.2% less expensive to live in overall than Los Angeles. Food for thought. All right, now that we've got a lot of the factual disrespect against Los Angeles out of the way, let's talk about some respects where it is better than Austin, Texas. And the first one I'm going to touch on in this case is going to be the subject of weather. It is painfully obvious to most people that people love going to California to enjoy the weather. If you like it a little bit more on the chilly or colder side, you'll go to NorCal, and that is where you'll have San Francisco, the gorgeous Bay Area. And if you like it more on the warmer side, you'll enjoy SoCal, so Orange County, Los Angeles, San Diego, San Clemente, etc. And I touched on it a little bit earlier, but in Texas, and we're talking specifically about Austin, from May to August or September, you're going to have triple digits. That is just how it is. But the good thing is that once you get to September, October, all the way through March or April, you're going to see it in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, sometimes the 80s, sometimes the 40s. Now, we actually had a freakish snowstorm this past year where it snowed so heavily that the city actually shut down. People could not go to work, kids could not go to school, people couldn't drive, power grids lost power, people had to charge their phones in their car, people had to warm up in their cars, people, including myself, had to take a head bath over the sink with a pitcher and some water and some soap. Going back to the old-fashioned barbaric ways of living without all of our luxuries. It was an absolute mess. So I will say, it snows in Austin, Texas, but that was once every maybe 7 years. But if you like snow and you're picking between Los Angeles or Austin, you're gonna go with the place that snows once every 7 years over the place where it never snows. But other than that freakish snowstorm, Austin is pretty nice the rest of the year. It's absolutely gorgeous. A lot of people move here from cold weather states to enjoy winters in Austin, you know what I mean? But if you have money and you're from Austin, when summertime comes, you go to a place where it's a little bit more tolerable. So that's really in a nutshell what Austin is like. The air is a little bit more moist, not so much humid like Houston per se, but it's more dense, more heavy than the more drier climate you'll find in Los Angeles. And on that note, Los Angeles even still has the better weather. Now, where I lived in Los Angeles was a little bit east of Los Angeles, technically in Pasadena. I say Los Angeles because it's easier for most people who are not from there to just say, oh, Los Angeles, because all I had to do was hop in my car and drive 15-20 minutes west, and I'm in Los Angeles. You know what I mean? So my point in bringing that up is, in Pasadena, you're closer to the desert mountain landscape of California, and Los Angeles is closer to the coast. And let me tell you, it is so nice when you are in Los Angeles. Let's say you're enjoying a day in Westwood, let's say you're enjoying a day in North Hollywood, let's say you're enjoying a day in Santa Monica, and you're walking and you're doing some outdoor shopping or whatever you're doing, and you get a little bit closer, a little bit closer, a little bit closer to the coast, and you start to feel this gust of cool Pacific Ocean breeze, crisp air slap your face. There is nothing like it. It is absolutely intoxicating, and it was one of my favorite experiences ever of living in California. And I will say I became pretty envious because over just 20-30 minutes away in Pasadena, there would be days where we experienced 95, 98, 101, 102 and up degree weather, and it was horrible in the houses there. Like I said, many did not have air conditioning. So I was thinking, oh man, I left Austin, Texas to experience this. And then I would check the weather app and I'd look at Santa Monica or Laguna Beach or San Clemente or any of these places on the water, 85, 72, 78. Just because it's constantly, perpetually in like this purgatory state of perfect, blissful weather, because you're right there on the water, dry air meets ocean breeze, perfect marriage of the two. Nothing like it. And I was fortunate to live a little bit in the San Clemente, San Juan Capistrano area. And if you're not familiar with that, it's maybe 40 minutes south of Orange County. And if you're not familiar with Orange County, that's maybe an hour south of Los Angeles, all right along the coast. Absolutely gorgeous. And at the end of the day, even if I was going to experience 100-degree weather, I would much prefer to experience 100 degrees in the dry climate of California than I would in the dense climate of Austin, Texas. So California is finally a winner in this video. And we're not done yet. Moving on to another category in which Los Angeles absolutely trumps Austin, and that would be the category of sports. Now, sports is what I bring up in a lot of our comparison videos between cities and states, and I bring it up because it is more significant than you realize. Even if this doesn't apply to you, let me explain. A lot of people watching this video, wherever they're coming from, sports are a big part of their lives. They'll do it with their families. They'll go to these games with their parents, with their siblings, with their children, with their partners, etc. And it's a great way to bond. It's a great way to grow close, to have fun together, and to unite people. Sports is where absolute strangers become family. Sports plays the same effect of movies and entertainment and the arts, which is escapism from the world that we live in. It is where people forget about the strong opinions they hold, the prejudices they might have in their minds. They put all of that to rest for a little bit. They're very in the moment. The camaraderie begins, and you enjoy what you're watching just as you are going to the movies. And so on that note, for a lot of people, sports mean so much. And I bring this up when comparing because if you're moving to Austin, Texas, if you're not into college sports, you have absolutely nothing to enjoy. I myself am a diehard NBA fan, have been for most of my life. Played a lot of basketball growing up, ruined my knees. It's a long story. They pop now, that's just what I'm gonna say. And I would have loved the luxury of just getting some tickets and going to the game. Whatever game is on a Tuesday night, go to the city and watch them play. Not the case. And unfortunately, I'm not into college sports. So in Los Angeles, it is the absolute opposite. You have basketball, you have football, you have baseball, you have hockey. You want it, they have it. And for someone like me who's into basketball, they have not one, but two franchises, the Clippers and the Lakers. Rest in peace, Kobe Bryant. And so I bring this up because if wherever you're living, you're used to going to these events with your family, with your girlfriend, with your parents, etc., and it's a normal part of the way you live your life, Austin is not for you. Los Angeles, absolutely bar none, is. Moving on to another topic of discussion in which Los Angeles is better than Austin is the subject of diversity. And I'm not saying that because Austin is not diverse. I would argue quite confidently that Austin is the most diverse city you'll find in all of Texas because, as I said, it's a relocation hotspot. And so Austin is an absolutely amazing place to find people from all walks of life, a great big melting pot for people and cultures, and an otherwise very traditional and old-fashioned state, which is Texas. But when we're talking about Los Angeles, as I said, it is the transplant capital of the world. And it was so cool for me in my year that I spent there to see absolutely every possible fathomable color of the beautiful rainbow that is humanity in one city. In other places, especially where I'm from, if you're not Caucasian, you might feel like you stand out. But in Los Angeles, I would sometimes feel like I stood out, which is a beautiful thing if you're used to the opposite. And so if you are a big fan of diversity, Los Angeles is absolutely the mecca for it. I even had friends who were part of the Vedic faith, the Krishna faith, which is a little more obscure than your typical Catholicism, Baptist, Judaism, even Buddhism, religions and spiritualities. But even in Los Angeles, they had a place for that. They had meeting points. It was a great community. I mean, the diversity is not just in the skin tone or your nationality, where you're from, but also your interests, your faiths, your sexual preferences, and so much more. And real quickly on the subject of the LGBTQIA+ community, Austin is, of course, very welcoming of that, more than probably any other city in the gigantic state of Texas. But obviously Los Angeles is another mecca for that. Not only do you have a strong gay community, but in Los Angeles, more so than Austin, you will find more of the lesbian community, you will find more of the trans community, and more acceptance of the two. In Austin, it's not unheard of by all means, no. But it is less common. Even though Austin is very progressive, even though Austin is very liberal, you're still finding that it's playing catch up in the sense of the diversity within the LGBTQIA community. So if you or someone you know is considering living in either city, Los Angeles is always going to be the safer bet for that. But even still, they can still call Austin home. And since I brought up liberalism, that is something that Los Angeles and Austin, Texas really have in common. Now, it's no secret that Texas is very often called the Sea of Red, and Austin is the blue dot within the Sea of Red. And for the record, I am not picking sides, I am not casting any judgment, I'm calling it as it is. If you are a liberal, if that's what you identify as, you'll feel right at home in either Los Angeles or Austin, Texas. I will say though, if you are a liberal and you're moving to Austin, Texas, be warned, as soon as you leave the metro area, as soon as you leave the downtown atmosphere and you get into the suburbs, it doesn't automatically swing right, but it's going to be much more mixed. You're going to see more trucks, you're going to see less diversity, and it's going to be more middle of the road, more centrist. And then the further north or south you go, beyond the suburbs of Austin, that's when you'll find it really begins to be the land of conservatism. And on the flip side of that, California itself is a very blue state. So I'm not saying that there aren't certain areas in California where the demographic is more Republican or conservative, but you're gonna have an easier time finding liberalism and Democrats in the state of California than you obviously are in Texas. Moving on to another subject in which Los Angeles beats Austin. See, I told you I'd keep it more balanced now. That is going to be the subject of cannabis. And in case you didn't know, it is completely illegal in Texas. And in Los Angeles, it is not only legal, it is 420% legal in Los Angeles. So much so that the culture there is even a little bit more different in relation to cannabis. And I say that because here in Texas, let's say you finish a shift of work and you're with your coworkers and they say, hey, let's hit up ABC bar down the street and go for a post-work beverage and just enjoy the night. Very normal, and yes, that does happen in Los Angeles, but what I encountered and what I was very new to is other coworkers instead saying, hey, why don't you come over to my house, we'll sit on my front porch, I'll show you the brand new bong I just bought, and we'll smoke a bowl and enjoy the night. And first I thought they were either trying to be funny or maybe this person was just a stoner, you know what I mean? But no, that's just how it is. It's very normal. It's completely normalized as part of their own culture. And it took some getting used to, but it's also fun, you know what I mean? I had a dispensary not too far from where I was living, and that was a trip. I'd never been in a dispensary in my life. But aside from recreational use, aside from the fun stuff that I'm talking about, if you are someone who is used to having cannabis in their life to either help with depression, to either help with anxiety, or if you're like my older brother who has autism and epilepsy, you might use THC and cannabis treatments for seizures. If you're coming to Austin, Texas, and you need cannabis medicinally, please note this. You won't be able to, at least as easily, get the type of help that you need. I'd have to verify and cross-check and really confirm whether or not you can have it, say if you're in the stages of cancer per se, that might be different. That I don't have as much experience with. However, for other things in day-to-day life to help your quality of life improve, you're out of luck in Texas. And my prediction, yes, most states are flipping and they're legalizing it one by one. New York, the most recent one at the time of this video. But Texas being Texas will probably be one of the last. So if that applies to you, please keep it in mind. Another thing I'll mention only briefly is the subject of zoning. And I say that because being from Austin, you know where your more poor areas are, you know where your wealthy areas are, you know where your middle of the road areas are, and that's very much how it's structured here. But in Los Angeles, I was very surprised to find that you could have a bunch of homeless people along one certain street. You turn the curb or the block and you find mansions, you find wealth, you find luxury. And there's really no rhyme or reason, aside from, yes, the obvious Beverly Hills or something like that where it's exclusive, it's its own place, right? Other than that, in Los Angeles, it's very different. It's all kind of smushed together. And that's another thing I'll mention, the different vibes of Los Angeles and Austin. On the note of the zoning, and to elaborate on that further, the population difference is so dense in Los Angeles. Yes, it's getting worse in Austin, relocation, I went over it, but that was one of the biggest adjustments for me, moving from a spread out, peaceful, warm place like Texas where the streets are open, it's less congested, everything's bigger, instead of growing tall, it grows wide, just spread out and spacious. I had to adjust and get used to a place where everything is crammed together, so densely populated. There's never a street that is empty. There's never a parking lot that is empty. I had to get used to getting to certain places long before I needed to get there because I never knew if I'd even find a parking spot. That is normal in Los Angeles. That is not just something you occasionally have to deal with. You are always wondering, how am I gonna park? How much do I have to pay to park? Being from Texas, I never thought about parking. You've never had to worry about parking. So that's another thing about Los Angeles where it was quite an adjustment. And then everything being so smushed together, and then all of the people everywhere. Picture in your mind, you remember those TVs with the tubes in the back? Doesn't seem like too long ago now, but we're all getting older, right? We're like, whoa, that wasn't too long ago. Anyways, those TVs with the tubes in the back, and then you turn on the TV, and if it wasn't connected to something, you would just get that loud white noise static on the TV. That is what the energy felt like to step outside in Los Angeles, at least in my opinion. On any given day, the air is just stressful, it's tense, it's hardworking, it's hustle, it's if I don't win, I don't eat. That's the sense I got. Very crippling, and it's unique to Los Angeles. I'm not saying all of California is like that, because a lot of California, they don't even want to be associated necessarily with Los Angeles, because LA might as well be its own country, its own state, its own entity, right? It's very unique. But even visiting a place like New York, which I've been to, yes, it's a humongous city. Yes, it's densely populated, but it feels fresh. There's a certain harmony, there's a certain rhythm and rhyme and unity to the city of New York. Los Angeles is just constant stress, constant anxiety to be in. And it was, a lot of people there are fine with that. They're used to that. They don't know anything different. But if you're from a place like Texas, or you're moving from a place where it's more peaceful, more tranquil, more chill, it's gonna be quite a learning curve. It's gonna be quite an adjustment process for you. And so whether it's Los Angeles, whether it's Austin, whether it's the city, whether it's the suburbs, whether it's just you or you and your family, and everything in between, what we love to do and what we pride ourselves in doing is finding that perfect place for you, helping your transition and your relocation process go as smoothly as possible, getting the right fit for you, helping you list it where you live, helping you get your offer accepted here, etc., etc. But the only way we can do that for you is by you reaching out to us. So again, be sure to send us an email, shoot us a text, give us a call any day of the week, any time of day. It's what we love to do. It's what we're good at. And we've got your back when moving to Austin, Texas. Again, be sure to subscribe for more as we put out new videos every week. Ring the little bell so that you're notified. Comment down below. Questions, disagreements, agreements, video ideas. Like the video to help us grow. And until the next one, you guys, we'll catch you later.